I'm Kento Bento.
This video is made possible by Dashlane. Download Dashlane for free if you never want to forget another password again at the link in the description. Asia 2019. This video will be different from normal because it won't just be about one event, but 42 events in the near future, all happening in Asia in 2019. Now, of course, predicting such events is extremely difficult, but we can always give our best estimates based on the information we currently have. Before we start, if you're unsure of which countries are considered Asian according to the international community, feel free to check out our video series on Asian borders. We will start from January 2019. India will launch the Chandrayaan-2 lunar exploration mission, where, if successful, will become only the fourth country to land a spacecraft on the moon. They will, however, be the first to land near the lunar South Pole, a territory yet to be explored. Back on Earth, the Philippines will hold the 10th edition of the Mr. World competition, an international male beauty pageant. This will be the biggest Mr. World in history, with more than 100 candidates from around the world converging in Manila. The defending champion Rohit Kandawal from India is actually the first Asian competitor to have won Mr. World back in 2016. Baidu, a Chinese tech giant, one of the largest internet companies in the world and China's biggest online search provider, will launch self-driving buses to the public in various Chinese cities like Shenzhen and Beijing. Trials for this self-driving technology are currently being wrapped up, with the company planning to also deliver at least 10 of the buses to Tokyo. Baidu is basically seen as the Chinese equivalent to Google, due to Google being blocked in China. But come January, this will likely not be the case, as Google has been quietly collaborating with the Chinese government to launch a new censored version of their search engine, codenamed Dragonfly. Amnesty International has called this a dark day for internet freedom, which could pave the way for other countries like Russia, Turkey, and Iran to implement their own control measures to censor content and opinion on Google in their countries. This has led to significant uproar, even from Google's own employees, over 14,000 of which have signed a petition raising moral and ethical issues. On a lighter note, January may see the Indian YouTube channel T-Series finally defeat PewDiePie to become the most subscribed YouTube channel of all time, making them the first Asian channel to top the YouTube rankings. Though of course with anything on YouTube, this is highly unpredictable. And speaking of being unpredictable, around this time, Kim Jong-un is expected to visit Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow for the first time, which would make Russia only the fourth country the supreme leader has set foot in since taking power, after China, South Korea, and of course Singapore, where Kim Jong-un and the US President Donald Trump met back in June. Not much information has yet come out for Kim and Trump's second meeting, but it is planned for early 2019. In about February, South Korean conglomerate Samsung will release what they claim will be the first foldable smartphone, the Samsung Galaxy X, where the fold will be on the actual display screen, so it can be a tablet one moment and a phone the next. Now, towards the end of the month, Thailand will hold their much-delayed general elections, the first since the 2014 military coup. In March, North Korea will hold their elections, or rather elections in quotation marks, as so-called candidates are chosen by the states, handpicked by Kim himself. These candidates then run unopposed, meaning it's fair to say with 99.99% certainty that Kim Jong-un will win re-election. In April, Afghanistan and Indonesia will also hold their elections, but unlike the Hermit Kingdom, actual regime change will be far more likely. Both elections have been overshadowed by a divided political system and threats of rising extremism, which isn't so surprising in the case of Afghanistan, where much of its territory is still controlled by the Taliban. And it's really not much better in Indonesia, with the flag burning, protests, and crackdowns on LGBT communities. Now, I quickly want to say special thanks to our longtime patron and channel supporter, Bruce, currently living in Jakarta, who helped provide information for that last point. And speaking of this channel, this Asian-y channel, April will hopefully see Kento Bento reach 500,000 subscribers. Why am I referring to myself in the third person? I do hope it'll happen sooner, but with videos getting demonetized and suppressed like our very last video, which probably wasn't suggested to you, who knows when that'll actually be. Of course, if you want to be a patron like Bruce and help support this channel, which would be really appreciated, please check out our Patreon page. Also in April, Japanese Emperor Akihito will abdicate his throne in favor of his eldest son, Crown Prince Naruhito. This event will mark the end of the Heisei period, the current era in Japan. Abdication has not occurred in the country in over 200 years. Now, the first Emirati astronaut from the UAE will make his way to space, followed shortly in May by Israel, who will launch their first spacecraft to the moon, which after India's South Pole mission will make them the fifth country to land a lunar craft. And speaking of Israel, the 2019 Eurovision Song Contest will be held in Tel Aviv. Eurovision is a super popular international song competition held primarily among countries in Europe, which as such might seem odd to some that Israel, a West Asian country, is hosting and participating. But with Morocco and even Australia having joined in the past, you can see eligibility is pretty loose. May will also see Taiwan make history as the first Asian state to legalize same-sex marriage. And about this time, India will hold their general elections, which in their 70-plus years of independence will likely be the first election that seriously challenges their inclusive political culture. Current Prime Minister Narendra Modi may be unseated. In June, Japan will host their first G20 summit of world leaders, and in Sri Lanka, construction will begin on a new financial and commercial center. This $1.4 billion port city in the Indian Ocean will be built by China under the Belt and Road Initiative, meant to resemble other major urban centers like Hong Kong, Singapore, and Dubai. However, do not expect to see this leading financial hub anytime soon, as completion is slated for 2041. In around July, the world's first air taxi trials will be completed in Singapore. Taking a page out of the Jetsons, Volocopter, a German aviation company backed up by tech giants Intel and automotive firm Daimler, will attempt to transform mobility and logistics in Singapore with their flying cars based on drone technology. The aim is to mitigate traffic congestion by opening up the first commercial air taxi routes within the next 3 to 5 years. Congestion is also great on the 2 bridges linking Singapore and island nation to the Asian mainland, which is why around this time there are also plans to start construction on a 3rd Singapore-Malaysia bridge. And speaking of Southeast Asian countries, in August, all 10 countries in ASEAN, that's Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Brunei, will for the first time hold maritime exercises with the US. Having the US and all the ASEAN countries involved would be the biggest display of combined force against China in modern time. China and the US both wield considerable influence in the region, and with many ASEAN countries currently being at odds with the PRC over claims to the South China Sea, it'll certainly be interesting to see how China reacts. Though come September, China will be busy hosting the FIBA World Cup, a major international basketball competition with a similar tournament structure to the FIFA World Cup. But it'll in fact be Japan who will really have their hands full in September, because they will be hosting the first ever Rugby World Cup in Asia. What makes this event particularly challenging will be the threat of natural disaster. The event is held in one of Japan's peak months for chaotic weather conditions, which have left organizers worried at the possibility of a sudden complete broadcasting blackout. September, just the year before, saw the worst storm in 25 years wreak havoc across parts of western Japan, leaving a trail of death and destruction. Turkey will attempt to minimize shipping traffic in its region by starting construction on the Canal Istanbul, an artificial sea-level waterway that will connect the Black Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. It would bisect Turkey over around here, which would result in the formation of a new island between the continents of Asia and Europe. The 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China will happen in October, which is also when they will open a new record-setting airport, the Beijing Daxing International Airport, which will become the busiest airport in the world, expected to serve 100 million plus passengers a year, beating the current record holder, Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta. October will also be the 150th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi's birth, which will coincide with India's grand plan to finish building 111 million toilets across the nation. Yes, that's 111 million toilets, the greatest toilet building spree in human history. This will be a huge step towards a better, cleaner India, as hundreds of thousands of Indians actually die annually from unsafe water and sanitation, primarily due to open, unclean toilets. In November, in preparation for the 2020 Summer Olympic Games, Japan will finally complete construction on the new national stadium in Tokyo, intended to be the main stadium of the upcoming Olympics. Now, by this time, if state sources prove to be accurate, Russia will have sent humanoid robots into space. No, not as cargo, but as actual crew members. This would be a world's first. Their repertoire will include human-like actions like push-ups, fist bumping, and shooting guns. And that might not be the only first, because Russia is also planning to send paying tourists to the International Space Station, or the ISS, where they would be able to go on commercial spacewalks. They would even be allowed to film videos, which means in the very near future, vlogging in space, or blogging, might just be a thing. Now, while Russia may be sending tourists into space, they won't be sending anyone from NASA, because their obligation to deliver US astronauts to and from the International Space Station ends in November. NASA has relied on Russia to get to the ISS since the retirement of the space shuttle in 2011, which means that they'll have to now find another way. And well, they have, because NASA will be paying Elon Musk's SpaceX and Boeing $6.8 billion to fly them to the ISS, a first for privately owned companies. And speaking of Elon Musk, Tesla, the automotive company based in California, will open factories in Shanghai, China. It's the first time Tesla will be manufacturing outside of the US, and while other companies are trying to move production outside of China due to the ongoing China-US trade war, Tesla will be doubling down as they attempt to get a stronger foothold in the Chinese market. By this time, India may open its first Apple store, with planned locations in New Delhi, Bengaluru, and Mumbai, with many other companies also trying to expand into the Indian market in 2019, including IKEA, Xiaomi, Spotify, MasterCard, Uniqlo, and once again Tesla. With India having one of the largest populations in the world, this isn't surprising. By the end of 2019, the population will be near 1.39 billion people, which would be 30% of Asia's entire population at over 4.62 billion. And with all these people, I guess it's only fair Asia get its own international song competition, which is why in December, Eurovision Asia will be launched, intended to be very similar in concept to the European version. Now, as for why it's not called Asia Vision, well, that's due to legal reasons. Now, Hong Kong and Singapore have made bids to host the very first event, but it was ultimately Australia that ended up being selected, which seems a pretty weird choice for the first Eurovision Asia competition, but there were extenuating circumstances. Throughout 2019, Chinese telecom giant Huawei will consolidate its lead over Apple in smartphone sales, solidifying its global status and making them second only to Samsung. Note that's 8 Asian companies in the top 10. This is especially impressive for Huawei given their products are effectively banned in the US due to being perceived as a national cybersecurity threat. Washington has accused the company of being a potential facilitator for Chinese spying and cyber theft. And on this note, 2019 will also see rogue nations like North Korea increase their cybercrime activities worldwide, with damages exceeding well over $2 trillion. And with 1/3 of cybercrime in general coming from Asia, it's about time we all use a great password manager app like Dashlane. Because Dashlane makes keeping track of all your passwords ridiculously easy. It stores all your passwords in one super secure place and autofills them on websites you go to. If you have the same password everywhere, and I know many of you do, but are too lazy to go to each individual website to change your passwords, well, not a problem, because you can just click one button on the Dashlane app and it does it for you. Dashlane also gives you security alerts when there are data breaches on websites you use, as well as access to a password generator, so you don't have to spend time thinking up super strong passwords like this one. By going to dashlane.com/kentobento, you can get started for free. And if you want some extra special features like syncing your passwords and login details between all your devices like iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows, you can upgrade for 10% off by using the promo code KENTOBENTO at checkout.